Right, that's us. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Welcome to the Future of Work Scotland. It's our last session of the year. Here you go. That's why Team and I had agreed we'd go a little bit festive tonight to celebrate what's been like quite a momentous year. Pretty turbulent, that's for sure. And we'll have a little chat about that later if anybody wants to hang about after and hang out with us. You're welcome to do so. We're going to extend the session beyond our usual 8:30 hard stop. So you're welcome to kick about and mingle, chat, have a few laughs if you fancy it. So this evening, our usual code of conduct. We're just asking short that you be respectful to one another and everybody have a great evening. Don't know if we'll have much in the way of community shout outs, but if I think of anything, we'll do that at the end. Talk a little bit about our plans for 2021. And with that, I'm delighted to welcome Marc Abraham this evening. Marc is going to kindly facilitate a panel discussion for us. So we're really looking forward to that. You might remember our one with Susan Doyle-Morris earlier in the year. So we're going to have another one. This time we're going to focus on all things product. So Marc's going to lead us through that. Marc is he's the head of product at London-based ASOS. He's also written a couple of books on products, including his latest one, is Managed Product, Managed Tension. Did I get the title right? Yeah. And it's just recently released. So excited to read that one. And Marc's going to take us to a panel discussion for about 50 minutes or so. He's going to introduce the panelists. I'm going to leave that to him. Looking forward to hearing from them all. And then we're going to open up to yourselves. So the usual fashion, join in, participate as you always do. If you have questions, drop them in the chat for us, and then we'll facilitate them back to the panel through Marc. That's our plan for this evening. Without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Marc. Marc.
Thank you so much for the intro. This is the bit where I'm going to share my screen and keep my fingers crossed that it's going to go smoothly. But let's host disabled attendee screen sharing.
Oh, okay. Right, here we go. So, let me see if I can fix that.
Classic. I'm so pleased. Welcome all. Thank you so much for having me and the panel who I'm going to introduce. I'm so pleased that I didn't have like a 45-minute, 900 slide deck that everything for tonight rested upon, right? I'd be in a state. Instead, I had some intro slides just to set the scene for tonight. If I can't share them.
No, you'll be okay. You'll be okay. I think that should be enough. No, it's just I'm using my Zoom tonight. And it's
let's have a look.
How did I go?
Let go. It's hard to let go, typically.
There you go.
Excellent. Let me just minimize a few things and go into presentation mode. Hope you can see my screen. All enabled. You now know who I am after that lovely introduction. Thank you for that. Yes, I've just written a book, which I might refer to as part of the conversation tonight. But more importantly, we've got 4 amazing panelists with us tonight, some real life product people who will tell their kind of stories, lessons learned, share some tips with you. And I'd like you to meet Ruby. Ruby is a growth product manager at ASOS with over 8 years of product management experience across different industries. She is passionate about building and scaling innovative products and features from idea to launch. My friend Dave Thomson, who is the Chief Product Officer at Earned, which is a company specializing in enabling people having full visibility of their earnings. And Dave has been in product for the last 16 plus years, I reckon, having worked both in VC funded and public companies. We've got Kunbi, who hopefully later tonight she will show you the background because she's in Waterloo in Canada. Amazing level of snow there. She's passionate about creating digital experiences that users love. She's been managing products for 6+ years within the financial services, recruitment and education space. In her spare time, she also mentors and coaches young professionals looking to establish themselves in fulfilling careers. And last but not least, Sean, who is a senior product manager at Acre, which is a company that focuses on simplifying the mortgage process, both for buyers and mortgage brokers. He has been in product for about 9 years and describes himself as a decisive and collaborative problem solver, passionate about delivering innovative digital experiences. So you can see we've got an amazing panel here with lots of experience there and lots of different backgrounds and industries. So we should really have a good conversation, because what we're going to talk about tonight is about leaning in. And when I talk about leaning in, I talk about leaning into tension, which might sound counterintuitive, because most of us by very nature might dread tension, whether it's tension with other people, tension around our products, tension around our businesses. But I want to make a case for acknowledging tension, accepting that it's there, recognizing it, being able to analyze it, and then actually using tension for good, using it as a springboard, leaning into that tension. The reason why I believe there's a lot of potential for a lot of tension within product management is that if you think about product management, you break it down, it comes down to a combination of the mind, people that we work with, our own minds, people that we're accountable to or responsible for, the matter that a product is made of, be it software code or let's say plastic, and the moves that we make or don't make in relation to our products, the decisions that we make. I believe that each of these individual kind of components of product management can cause a lot of tension, good and bad. But think about it even as a mix, you've got something really explosive there. And that's what we're going to talk about is, if that's the case, if you have these sources of tension, how can we get comfortable with those tensions that might occur as we're developing products? So the first step that will come back in our conversation tonight is acknowledging tension. One of the first questions later on I'll ask the panelists is, what kind of tensions have you experienced or do you experience in your day jobs? What is causing that tension? What's the impact of the tension? How do you typically respond, or how does your team respond to tension? Analyzing it. What can you do about it? Do you take a moment to step back from the tension, understand what's going on? We'll talk a bit about going to the balcony or creating a moment of choice. Because when you're on that balcony and you're taking a step back from whatever is creating the tension, whether it's people related to the matter of your product or a decision that needs to be made, it's really reflecting on what's happening and looking at the bigger picture ultimately. And then towards the end of our kind of initial kind of conversation as a group, we'll talk about how can you make the most of tension? How can you use it as a springboard? How can you use tension as a source of information? How can you use it as a way of restating or reframing a problem, creating an opportunity to maybe react differently or do something that you haven't done before. So we'll talk about how you start leaning in, and we'll hear from the panel and hopefully from you guys as well as, how do you feel about tension? How do you lean into tension? Have you learned how to optimize? Are there any things that have worked for you in that respect? So that is just some slides and just a bit of context for tonight's conversation. But I'm positive that you didn't come to the session tonight to just listen, to look at slides, and you want to hear the panelists. So hopefully I'm back. You've seen the slides. Hopefully I've set the scene. And I want to kick off the conversation by just asking the panelists, and we're in a safe space. I've just heard the rules that were set for these kind of guidance that was set for these kind of meetups. So I'm curious, and I have to see who I'm going to start with. Maybe I'll start with Dave. Dave, tell us honestly, when was the last time you felt tension when you were managing products?
I think about an hour and a half ago, to be honest. So, and actually, a couple of my team are on the call, and so they were in that backlog planning session with me. Now, so look, I think for context, I'm working in a very early stage company which has recently been acquired by a much larger organization, and so we're going through a process of trying to align the parent organization's goals and aspirations with the mission of the company that we joined and that we belong to. So essentially, you have some slightly misaligned goals, I think everyone is trying to go in a similar direction, but the path to get there, I think people have different routes to try and get there. So the short answer to your question is probably about an hour and a half ago when we sat down to try and like break the back of like Q1 roadmap planning. And we realized like not only do we have a bunch of different ideas, but we fundamentally have different ideas about how might we even approach this backlog and how might we even start to plan it. So probably about 90 minutes ago, some tension in figuring out how do we plan it. But I also look at it as like I saw that as kind of like a problem deluxe in my head, which is we have a bunch of ideas. We have a bunch of capable people who want to go and try and deliver those ideas. Just how do we approach this? Where do we even start? So it's kind of like fun problems to solve in a way.
Gotcha. And I'm now curious, thanks for sharing that, Dave, if anyone can beat that level of recency of when they felt tension. Because I was going to say the last time I felt tension was probably earlier this afternoon when, we had to make trade-offs between do we innovate for a product and how do we also do the business as usual kind of hygiene stuff. But the 90 minutes that, he just thrown the gauntlet, Dave, beats that. Ruby, when was the last time you felt tension working on a product?
I literally would have said about an hour ago as well. Well, it's a funny one because I feel like there's tension every day. Obviously, some healthy, some useful, some you've just got to manage in different ways. But the particular tension today was just around, I guess as everyone's feeling a little bit stressed as well with the end of the year, and especially especially in the retail world. Of finishing Black Friday and then now going off into Christmas. But yeah, tension today just to make sure all the different teams are aligned and sort of pre-planning for the next quarter. So our quarter finished yesterday. So it's on the start for the new quarter. So it's just like planning for the future. So it's just aligning objectives and goals together.
Thank you. Sean, tell us, when was the last time you felt tension?
Similarly to Dave and Ruby, very recently, so today, and it was aligned to or around the subject of approaching the end of the year. Even the clients that use our platform maybe won't be engaging with it as usual because they're mortgage brokers and everyone's obviously starting to wind down for Christmas. So planning what do the next few weeks in terms of our delivery look like, and also what are the main priority items to work on in the upcoming quarter of 2021. So then you have a lot of different stakeholders, different ideas. Everyone's got a passion for the product. Everyone wants to see us delivering value, but we may not be aligned on what to deliver, what to prioritize, what to even scrap as an idea. So there's a lot of pulling around that at the moment.
And in that, just who, maybe also for Dave, but who makes the calls on trade-offs when you have those kind of, as you say, competing passions or lack of alignment? Is that a consensual kind of thing, or someone stands up and say? It's
a good question, and I could answer that differently in the different companies that I've worked in. But again, I think I'm 2.5 months into my job. And I was the first product person in, and then I've been lucky enough to hire an amazing team in the last couple of months, and so everyone in that room is kind of very new to the business. So we're actually figuring out together, like, how do we operate as a team? How do we want to make decisions? Who's bringing some subject matter expertise on this topic? And there's just so many great ideas, like where do we even begin? So actually it's a two-part problem, which is there's all this amazing, ideas for the product that we might want to look at. But first of all, like as a team, how do we want to operate? So kind of got a bit like 2 jobs to do in parallel, which is like, hire and spin up a team and figure out how we work. And then how do we approach this product problem? So I don't know the actual answer to that yet about how we might make the final decision, but I'd like to think that we'll get to some kind of consensus as a team, rather than it being, the horrible top-down decisions that we've come to hate.
Yep, absolutely. We'll come back to that. It's an interesting one, and because you touch on 2 interesting things there, Dave. Team formation, going through that norming and storming, which I'm sure will bring some tensions with them, not all bad, and then the decision making. Kunbi, when was the last time that you felt tension or experienced it?
I would say 5 days ago, and that's only because I've been on holiday for the past 5 days. The last meeting we had was the Q1 meeting and planning meeting for next year. And just for context, we're currently in a growth phase. We're a startup company moving from being a one product company to being like a 3-4 product company. And so we've got all these competing priorities from different stakeholders, from marketing, from customer success, from sales. And everyone's saying like, this is the most important thing we need to do next year. So I think, yeah, just being at that meeting and getting everyone to see we've got to be objective. All our goals matter. We can't have every single person have all the features built in January was quite a challenge. And that's pretty much the nature of the game, I would say.
Cool. Thank you for sharing. And Sean, what would you say if you had to choose between, like I talk about in my book, but if you think about tension caused by the mind, we heard some examples that people that we work with, tension caused by the product itself, could be software code, could be whatever material it's made of, or decisions. We heard Dave talk about decisions. What, in your experience as a product person, have you found to be the most common source of tension out of those 3 components?
People, definitely people, but in a good way, because everyone does want to, across the lifetime of my career, everyone that I've interacted with stakeholder wise, whether it be internally, externally, they have views on good ideas for the product or certain areas in the market where we could create fit, but because it's conflicting, oftentimes not everyone's on the same page. Reaching consensus can take a long time, and it can be a long, arduous process. You need to have a lot of evidence to back up your maybe argument, and maybe that's countered by an even stronger argument. But it's the collaboration that comes with the tension that can help the team to actually deliver on the expectations.
Ruby, what's your experience if you had to choose? Because I know, again, you've worked at a number of companies, different sizes. People, matter or moves?
I think, yeah, I'm unsure whether it's moves or not, sorry, matter or people. But in terms of, I would say the biggest one, I think for me is probably people. But that's not to say in a negative way at all, the tension, because like you said earlier, that you can get different types of tension. But I would definitely say people. I think as a product person, you're always dealing with different stakeholders, internally, externally, as Sean was saying, and different groups within the business as well. So I think it's always getting them on the same journey, and communicating well in terms of understanding what their objectives are, their goals are. But I think like at times it can be quite difficult if you're either new into the team or trying to understand everyone's goals as well.
Cool. And that's really helpful and really interesting, both those responses. And it feels like people is a big thing. And Kunbi, you touched on stakeholders, and I think we're really positive. Well, it's great, but we have to be cautious. Again, we're in a safe space. What makes a difficult stakeholder or person to work with? Give me one attribute.
Oh, that's a good one. So we've all got different perspectives. I think a really difficult stakeholder is often only able to see their perspective. Yeah, I would say that.
Dave, you've seen a lot of stakeholders in your time. Give me one attribute of a difficult stakeholder.
Yeah, I mean, I've been building products for a long time now. And I think actually what I've come to realize is that I don't believe that there is a thing called a stakeholder. I don't believe in them. That's my opinion. You are either building the product and you are in the boat and you are rowing with the team trying to deliver on that, or you are in the way. There's no middle ground for me, in my opinion. So actually, when we think about stakeholder management, my opinion is tell people whether they're in the boat or whether they need to get out of the way, but don't manage people who are interested and around you, because they're wasting you and your team's time. So try and help people understand which one they are, someone who's going to help or someone who needs to go away.
I think Ruby has got something to say on that. Is that right, Ruby?
Yeah, interesting. I guess interesting point around stakeholders. My question back is, you might have someone who just needs that education and to take them on the journey, because you may have had the first assumption that, okay, they're not in the boat, or they're not sort of seeing my vision. And you run the risk potentially of kind of outcasting them, and they could be on that stakeholder that could be in the boat and help row and steer the boat and be the captain at one point, maybe. So interesting point, but I wonder, like, have you ever had that approach and then thought, okay, maybe there's a differing view on that?
Yeah, I think it's come from years of wasting time trying to manage stakeholders, where I got to the point where, you know, in 2 or 3 days, you need to get people to understand whether they're going to be in the boat or out the boat. But like, you know, I use the boat analogy, like the boat is leaving, there's a bunch of people on it. Like, do you want to get on it or do you not want to be on it? But the boat will go regardless. So you pick and then tell me which one you want to be. So self-select in or out.
But Dave, what I'm curious about, and I'd love to Kunbi and Sean to hear your thoughts on this as well. How do you define, you know, being part of the boat? Because there might be people who say, you know, let's say when you worked at Skyscanner, and you don't have to name names, where there was a lot more people in the harbor who said, yeah, I've got so many boats, I can't be on each and every boat and helping to build a but like to make direction. What I'm saying is, how far can we drag this boat analogy onwards? But you get the point, right? Is especially in larger organizations, not everyone can be in the boat and still have a role to play.
I get the point. If I go even further back in time, to pre-Skyscanner, I was on the very early team at TransferWise back in the day, and part of the company onboarding was a simple statement that said, everybody who joins this business is building the product. Simple as that. In some way, you are contributing to building the product, whether you're in the customer support team and you're providing feedback and insight on how people are using the product, whether you're taking our product to market, whether you're a lawyer negotiating a contract to give us access to software or licenses that we need to do our job. But everyone comes into the office every day, and everyone is going to play a role in building this product. And so what I've seen in other companies is folks stand on the outside and throw rocks at people who are building the product, right? That's not a good idea. That's too expensive. You know, most of it comes from a place of either subjective opinion, protecting their empire or their position within the company. So it goes back just to understanding people's motivators and drivers and why they come to work every day. But you can, in most departments or functions of a business, you can say to that person, you are building this product and I need you to come and build it with me. So you can be in the boat. So it's the very edge case people that decide to, you know, stand back and say, I'm not participating in building this product. But there's a clear divide for me by saying, okay, cool, you're opting out. These folks are opting in. We're going to go this way. You can stay on the shore, but that's a conscious choice to make.
Interesting. And even though John is saying, can we leave the boat analogy because he's getting seasick apparently.
Too many boats, yeah.
Too many boats. But just if we stay, Kunbi, if that's all right with you or anyone in the panel, but maybe on that topic of people throwing rocks or not collaborating, not wanting to be in the boat, standing there. Have you got any tips or experiences on how you deal with those people and try to get them on board of the boat or get them on your journey?
Absolutely. And I had to learn the hard way, unfortunately. Early in my career, I thought, okay, so we all know we've got to ship this product. We've got all these priorities. And guys, we all have to commit. This is what we're going to do. If you don't like it, sorry. But what went wrong with that approach was I found that I was alienating certain people because they felt, okay, I don't buy into this. I haven't been convinced as to why to do this. And you're moving on. And so I had a chat with a boss some years ago, and he came up with this, well, I'm sure he'd heard it somewhere, this idea of disagree and commit. So we're on this boat, just using Dave's boat analogy. We know we may not all agree that this is the exact direction we want to go. However, if we're waiting till every single person agrees before we move, we're never going to move because we're never all going to agree. So his idea was, let's try disagreeing and committing. So today we think this might be the right direction. Let's try this direction. We know we don't all agree, but let's just try it and see how it works. If it doesn't work, we learn, we pivot. But if you're waiting for a time or point in time where every single person is in full agreement, then we're never going to move. So I kind of agree with Dave's, that approach of saying, this is the direction we've set as a team. We may be right, we may be wrong, but if we don't try, we don't know. So let's just all agree to make this work. And if it works, great. If it doesn't, then we move on.
What if, and maybe Sean, any thoughts, and if that, because I like that approach of disagree and commit and being clear about that, like Dave said as well, but what if that person who's throwing rocks at Dave happens to be super senior, has got a title that we can only dream of, a salary that encompasses all our salaries in this call, basically, and you're still telling him or her that they either have to be on the boat or we're going to experiment and we're going to disagree and commit. Does your approach change in terms of how you influence and how you take these people on a journey? Sean, any thoughts or experiences?
Yeah, so I definitely think it has to change. And I think that's the key with, well, if we want to still use the term stakeholder management, even though Dave's made me think about whether I should call it stakeholder management anymore. But in terms of working with people with different motivations, different attitudes, different approaches, and different levels of seniority, there's a lot of differences to manage with all the different people that you're working with. So I think that having a tailored approach for every conversation that you have, knowing that if you speak to one person one way, they can make them on board or at least see your point of view, and just knowing how to approach different people that you're interacting with. I haven't yet been able to overcome the HIPPO stakeholder, doesn't it talk about, with the highest paid person's opinion. I'm sure we all struggle with it in one way or another. I wouldn't say I have a silver bullet that kind of delivers the wanted approach each time, but it's still learning as I go along.
And Ruby, I don't want to pick on you, but obviously we work for the same company, and when I do speak to some of those senior, I'm not going to use the term hippo, but senior stakeholders at ASOS, they all speak very lovingly on you, and they get where you're coming from and stuff. So can you, for the people in the audience tonight who might be working in a large organization dealing with senior stakeholders or single-minded stakeholder, we had a question about what your secret is, or what works for you or doesn't work for you.
Yeah, sure. I think what I realized that the best way to handle all different types of stakeholders in the business, and especially those that are senior, is just communication. That's the one thing that I've just learned, that it's best to just over communicate, and it's up to them whether they read the emails or the Teams or the Slacks or whatever it is, but I will commit to updating weekly or whatever it may be. But I think what I like to do initially, before it's like, hey Ruby, I think we should do this, is kind of sit there and be like, okay, where's this idea come from? Normally it'd be like, oh, the shareholders, or someone said this, or my wife said it was a good idea to do this, or it could be it literally could be anything. And I think it's like, let's sit down, let's talk about this and really understand where this has come from. Because sometimes they're either just passing on what information they're just getting on from someone higher than them, or it could just be in passing conversation. So I think for me, the most important thing is to communicate regularly, understand what their goals are, where it's coming from, and what they want to achieve, what's their desired outcomes with any of these things. And it happens day in and day out, especially at the moment where we're working towards 3-year plans, which are just crazy in itself to say 3 years, but that's the new initiative that we're kind of working on internally. But it's understanding what metrics are they trying to move with this, and does that fit in with the company's strategy? If it doesn't, then kind of where do they see this being part of?
Thank you, Ruby. And Dave, you're very experienced, and how do you, in your experience, get people like Ruby said, asking those questions, especially if they're a bit more single-minded and they just woke up and had this, as Ruby said, a great idea, and then you're the product person in the middle saying, have you looked at these metrics, or what are the outcomes? How can you do that in such a way that you don't get your P45 straight away or are seen as a rebel that we shouldn't engage with?
Well, I was actually, well, P45 is a good segue in, because if you think of it this way, right? So product management is what I would call a highly leveraged role, right? You have a blast radius, you know, bigger than your own desk and your own team. If you build good things, company goes well. You build bad things, you're in charge, you get fired, right? And so when you come to that table where there's anybody is there, very senior stakeholder, I have an opinion, I have a product team who have opinions. At the end of the day, if we're all going to put an opinion forward and we all, you know, think that our way is the best way, our feature is the best feature, or let's do my idea, great. So let's put all of our features forward. We can always go back and say, yeah, let's get data and we'll analyze it and we'll ask customers, that's fine. Ask people if they're willing to put their career on the line. So, okay, you think this is the best way forward. So with great responsibility comes great accountability. So if you want to take us down this path for 3 months, 6 months, and that's your KPIs and objectives, if we get to the end of it and we fail, are you going to resign? Or are you going to get fired? You know, when you talk about it on those dimensions, people get a bit more cautious, right? What starts as a good idea on a whiteboard, when you're asking someone to put their, you know, put their neck on the block. And that's also a way, by the way, to gain permission to proceed. I've said to a couple of founders that I've worked with before, which is, you know, you've hired me to be your head of product or your CPO. That means you need to let me build this product. If you don't like how I build it, you can fire me. It's fine. But I need 3 months, 6 months to go and do the stuff that you hired me to do so that I can show you why you hired me in the first place. So sometimes the P45 thing is not so bad in the end as a lever or a tool.
Interesting. Now, thank you for sharing that. And maybe switching gears a little bit, because one of the tensions I've experienced quite a lot of times, and I write about in the book, which I call knitting spaghetti, where especially if you're solving problems or you're being creative, there's a lot of uncertainty and unknowns that come with that. But typically a lot of the people that we work with don't have that same desire or are used to working in uncertain terms. You know, think about, you know, when you work with people in the finance team, they seriously don't like uncertainty, right, most of the times, and particularly this year. But, you know, I would say even on a good day as a product person, at least in my experience, you deal with a lot of unknowns, a lot of more questions than answers to begin with, and you work your way through those, whether you've got a 3-month runway or 6-month runway, like Dave said. Have you got any experiences or tips of how you deal with that uncertainty, especially when you're working with lots of people or structure even an organization that's very much a bit like you were saying, Ruby, about 3-year plans, that oozes a desire for certainty to me. You know, we have a 3-year plan. How do you deal with the uncertainty, which is a reality of what we do? Kunbi, if I can start with you, any thoughts on that balance?
Absolutely. And I'll kind of go back to what Ruby said earlier about communication. I think lots of times across the teams, we've all got a different perspective about how things should work. So we've got, for example, this 3-year roadmap, but I know as the PM that there's certain things on there that we may have to remove, like not everything's going to be feasible. With uncertainty, I think just keeping stakeholders, just being very clear and transparent with them and letting them know, like we've got these things planned, we've got all of this on paper. In reality, 6 months from now, all of this can change. And also just being as objective as possible. We were in the planning session like last week and we had the 1-year roadmap played out. But even as we discussed, I could tell 8 months from now, given COVID and all that's happening, a lot of things could change. And then a few hours later, I had a team member say, okay, so now that we've got the roadmap in place, let's start planning for the next few months. And I thought, we don't know that we're going to be able to execute any of this in the next few months. So I think just being being as objective as possible and communicating any concerns you have, and just letting team members know we need to make sure we're in a place where we have as much info as possible before we take a major step is definitely helpful. And just not committing, so being clear as to when to say no, when to say yes, and when to say let's give it a few weeks, give it a few months and see how things go before we actually commit to building anything.
Thank you. Sean, you work with mortgage brokers, or the end user of your platform. certainty versus uncertainty.
Yeah, very much. And I generally view roadmaps as an evolving document, and it very much captures your understanding at the time. So a week from now, a month from now, the roadmap may change because the problems that you've identified or and that you want to solve or that have been prioritized may change over that period. So it's generally an interesting journey, obviously with external stakeholders as well, given you may have a view of certain things you want to deliver in a certain time within a certain period, but then that changes later on down the line. And are they aware of product processes that can have this change? Do they have the expectation that this should be delivered by then, or that things may change and other value may be created? Yeah, there's a lot to manage there.
But interesting, Sean, because actually I'm now pretending to be a stakeholder, but Dave, I just actually, I saw one of the 3-year plans that Ruby was talking about, and to me it says that on the 21st of September in 2023 we're going to deliver feature X. But now Sean is telling me that might not happen, but I've seen it black and white. It's a really nice looking Gantt chart, and it's really thought through. I can see it's all mapped out. What's happening here?
So I had the fortune or misfortune to do to kind of lead digital transformation at Marks and Spencer a few years ago and take it from waterfall to something that looked like agile. And their mode of operating for many years had been, well, we write a 100-page spec, we go to the management consultants, and they'll tell us, the exact date they'll deliver the thing. But crucially, we know how much the thing will cost, and we know what we'll get because it'll be in this spec. So their entire behavioral mechanism and reward mechanism was built up on time, on budget, pat on the back, well done, team. So reframing that from, well, actually, you're buying here a fixed thing, but then you all go to shareholder meetings once a quarter and you get held accountable for this thing called results and outcomes. So you get held accountable for outcomes from your shareholders, but what you want to do internally is have on time, on budget. Shouldn't we actually more do it how you guys get grilled at, shareholder meetings, accountability? So we managed to talk about, outcomes over things being built. But then we also said, look, you do want some certainty. So rather than the 3-year plan, why don't we put more gates in along the way where we can say, if we get outcome A, we get the right to proceed. And if we get outcome B, we get a little bit more, right to proceed. The downside though is, of course, like working in a PLC, you do have to do certain levels of reporting back to the city, right? And so you have to put some things into your quarterly reports and annual reports. So my best friends in doing this was corporate finance. They were able to help me get the thing that they needed to put in the report and map that back to how I wanted to work. So start with the corporate finance folks, because they'll explain your work to the city, and then try and move things, from kind of, on-time delivery to outcome-orientated delivery.
And are you saying, just also for the benefit of everyone on the call, when you're saying outcome-oriented, does it also mean, in your experience at least, we're going to say what the outcome is in terms of result we want to achieve or metric we want to uplift, and then it's up to the team to figure out how they're going to get there?
Yeah, I went with ROI. I said, look, okay, you have £100 million in the bank, right, as an abstract number, and you can leave that in the bank and earn 2% interest. If you give it to me and I can get you 7% interest on the money, that was money well spent. And that means if I can increase conversion rate by X or average order value by Y, it was money well spent. And so it was more trying to show them the ROI of the input in, which was pounds, and then showing them the output of those pounds invested. Because in a business that size, there's many things they can do with their capital, right? They can even do share buybacks or pay dividends. So I had to show them that investing in me was better than doing, a share buyback, for example.
And anyone on the panel, again, any experiences or learnings from taking people on that kind of journey? Because what they've, to me at least, is describing it, it's quite ballsy. And I think particularly for some people who are not used to working in that way and much more that kind of, yes, this is the list of requirements, or this is on time, on budget, this is what team X is going to give me, and then I'll check in with them at the end of the quarter when they say they're going to deliver it, to much more, some might feel open-ended kind of outcome, but I don't know what they're going to do. How do you take people who are not so used to that way of working or thinking and haven't drunken the Kool-Aid that Dave and I might have been drinking over the last few years? How do you take them on that journey? Anyone, any experiences? Actually, I'm gonna, if it's all right, I'm just curious, because there's lots of people here who work with teams. I want to just break it up, because I'm genuinely curious how you take people, because what Dave, I think, is talking about is a change in mindset. Anyone got a good experience of how they've taken people on their journey to think from a more classic on time, on budget, on scope to we've got an outcome, we know what our North Star metric is, let's say, and we've got more flexibility on how we get there?
You opening that up beyond the panel?
I'm curious, because the panel, we're just curious.
Yeah. Anybody?
Anyone saying yes? I killed it. I'm in a journey right now doing exactly that, and I can tell you, people are getting nervous. But I'm using, I was going to say my natural charm, that would be a bit rich. But what I've said is, what I've learned over the years, a bit like Dave, I guess, is I talk a lot about risk. I made the mistake initially talking a lot about hypotheses and assumptions, and people are like, what have you been smoking? So that didn't work. But what I do is say, don't worry too much about the features. We know what the outcome is. What I don't want to do is be in a situation where I commit to feature X, risk spending all time, money, opportunity cost, you name it, and then delivering something that makes you happy because you said that's the feature that we delivered, and we did it again, as it said in the plan, but it didn't get anywhere near the outcome because we didn't follow a more iterative, outcome-focused approach. So again, I've learned to take people on a journey about talking about risk, because that's something that resonates with a lot of people, right? That's language we all get. People understand the risk of not doing something, the risk of losing something. So that's how I try to do it. But it is, I can see it, things I'm working on now. It's just a different mindset to say, I don't know what I'm going to be doing in 3 months, but I know I'm accountable for that number. So whatever we're going to do, that number and that result, that outcome, both for the customer and, then a business result related to that, we're going to work on that. That's going to be front and center. But you have to trust me that we're going to always keep that front of mind. Customer needs linked to business objectives. But it is very different to presenting a massive, big ass Gantt chart with specific features and timings.
Cool. Mark, I did get a willing volunteer. John's quite keen to share.
Oh, John, yeah, because John has been very active. So
yeah, John, you want to unmute and share? Happy for you to
yes.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the one that jumps to mind instantly for myself was the introduction of Scrum Agile to a finance company. They'd been very, very waterfall generated or focused previously. It was actually moving them from a waterfall project with, as we've already heard, 3-year plans for migrating things to a much leaner process. And similar to Dave, I basically said, well, if we can't deliver the first increment within 3 months, I'll just go. Not interested. So it was very much a case of trying to meet those company objectives, and I think it was costing us £1 million a year to maintain a third-party contract to maintain some servers or something. So basically, we went off and delivered very, very quickly. That sort of, our project basically came in way early. We got a lovely beer bonus, and basically the entire IT department changed because of that. So to demonstrate to the higher ups, it was CEO, CTO, COO, all bought into this idea that they needed to change how software was being delivered, and the benefits were immense. We probably saved them £3 million that year.
And is it, you know, it's interesting. Thank you for sharing, John. I really appreciate that. You mentioned obviously a bank. I was going to ask Sean and Dave particularly, because I can imagine that your products and the areas that you now work in are more regulated, you know, and from a compliance perspective than, let's say, working in online fashion. Are there any extra tensions that we haven't talked about thus far that come into play when you have to think about regulation, you have to think about compliance? From your experience, Dave?
Yeah. I mean, I can talk to you. I'm sure Sean can as well. But I mean, I think being in a regulated environment means that you have individuals in your business that can go to jail if things go wrong, and you can't say that in many businesses, right? And so it means there are certain checklists that you need to look at before you would do something, right? But you know, the same can be said for launching any feature. There's certain things you would look at before you launch it. The only bigger downside is some folks can go to jail. You can lose maybe a bit more money than normal. And you know, that stuff very quickly ends up, you know, Sunday Times front page, which can have detrimental impact on your brand. But I think, you know, the path to launching any product goes through several checklists. But you know, I've worked in e-commerce before, and you know, no one goes to jail if you send a few parcels to the wrong address, right? Send a few pounds to the wrong bank account, someone does jail time. So yeah.
Yeah. Sean, any thoughts on that?
Dave kind of packaged it very well. Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot to manage because I've worked in financial services like investment banking and insurance and then mortgage brokering. And yeah, the regulatory environment informs a lot around how much you toe the line and always keeping it in mind in the forefront of when you're delivering.
Cool. Thank you. And one of the other tensions that we haven't talked about, which I hear a lot about, you know, I've encountered myself, but also a lot of the people I work with or come across, is what I call the not seeing the wood for the trees tension, where there's just so much going on and we want to do it all. How do you manage that? A bit like you were starting off, Dave, and you put it in a positive light where you say, oh, we've got lots of ideas, but equally there's lots of companies where there are lots of plans or, you know, there's 95 priorities where you could argue is that prioritization, but that's a different discussion. How do you deal with that as a product person or as an engineer or designer working like, where do I start? Or any thoughts on that, Kunbi? If I can start with you, any thoughts on managing and maybe carving your way through the wood?
Absolutely. And I think, I mean, it's definitely applied a lot in my current role where we're building all these different products at the same time in a new industry. We've got lots of ideas from like marketing, from founders, from, you know, stakeholders across the company. And we're all thinking this could go, if we go in this direction, things could go really well. This could be the next, you know, could earn us our next 100 million, or it could be this other direction. And it's down to me to decide, okay, so we've got all these different things. Where do we begin? It's not always an easy decision to make. I typically would start by saying, what's the goal? Like, where are we trying to get to with this? What do we say no to? That's probably the most difficult thing I've found. Knowing when to say, okay, so we know this sounds like it makes sense, but we know at the same time the numbers don't add up. We're not going to go in this direction, even though it was a co-founder's idea. So I think it's just being clear about what the exact metrics are that we're looking to work towards, be clear about the goal, being clear about the goals, and being able to justify, you know, when we say no to things, because ultimately it boils down to saying no to 90% of those ideas and saying yes to 10% of those. And once you have clarity around which of those ideas best align with where you're looking to go, it's always an easier conversation to have. You're more convincing when you can back up your no, when you can say it's no because of X, Y, Z. It's no because the numbers wouldn't add up. It's no because the market doesn't agree with that idea.
Thank you. Sean, out of interest, have you got any tips or common ways that you say no?
I'm generally, personality-wise, I'm quite direct with the way that I am able to say no. But I always, because you don't want to put anybody down or make it seem like you're invalidating or just discarding any idea that they may have. I think it's more a case of ensuring that every decision made is in line with the product vision, the strategy, and also with delivering the most value for your end users. So ensuring that your no is grounded in the prioritization of other things which maybe take precedent over the ideas that others may have.
Ruby, any tips, particularly for people in listening to today, where they think, I find it really hard to say no to that person, or I don't have the right tools or the confidence to say no?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think it's really interesting, because I think sometimes my personality, probably similar to Sean in his directness, but I think for me, it's like, let's listen. I think the number one thing as product people is to listen and really hear out some of the different suggestions that are made, the different features. And before you kind of cut in, which I know that some people can do, and then the other person that feels that they're not listened to, or their ideas, is just taking them on that journey. And you kind of put it to them as like, okay, we've got these 3 different things, or you might have 100 different things. Let's think about what the value is versus the effort. That you can compare those 2 things, but also putting it down to, okay, what are the metrics? I guess that Kunbi was saying as well, like, what are the metrics we're trying to move? What does good look like as well? So say we launch this feature, what does good look like? What's the desired outcome? And what's the risk of not doing it versus doing something else? So I think it's taking everyone on that journey who's involved and being really clear about the goals for it.
Thank you. And it's interesting, because I see saying no as a way of almost optimizing tension, and a bit like you were saying, Ruby, just laying out what the options are, talking openly and having conversations where it's not about who wins the battle, about trade-offs, and at least talking about that. Dave,
sorry,
go on, Ruby.
I actually have one example, funnily enough, actually, just on a project that I'm working with, is our marketing team were really adamant. We want to drive app downloads, Ruby, regardless of anything else. This is the most important thing that we want to do, and we need to do X to do this. And actually, I said to them, I understand. It was kind of like a back and forth of emails, and it came to a point where one of the marketing girls was like, "Look, Ruby, I'm really sorry. I don't mean to be rude or abrupt." And I actually went back and said, "I don't see it at all. I actually appreciate that we can have these conversations, because if anything, it just shows we're very passionate about the area that we work in. And I understand you're trying to move X, but at the same time, I've got to think about customers, and we don't interrupt that journey." So it's really interesting, because without having that openness to have the challenge and that clarity, and then sort of that safe space, I think is really important, because at the end of it, we didn't go with that suggestion, but actually we found a different solution to kind of marry to find the middle ground of it.
Thank you for sharing. And that absolutely, I think that's a great example of embracing that tension, not being afraid of it, clarifying it almost, to say it's not about you, or it's just, this is a good conversation to have. Dave, I could be wrong. No, I'm not, because I know you. How do I'm sure you've got some tips on how you optimize and bring out, almost create a bit of tension to really get to good results for the customer, or to, meet business goals.
Yeah, I think, look, there's I can give you like a kind of tactical lens on that, like having said no to people for the last 16 years of my life. I think I've done it a few times, and I think I've figured out how to do it. And then the strategic angle of like, how do you try and manage this before it becomes a thing? So on the tactical side, how I found this go before is like, if someone comes with an idea and they're very passionate about the idea, rather than first be the kind of person that is going to say no to them, almost try and be an advocate for that idea and say, right, okay, let's go and explore your idea together. I really want to get on board with this. For me to get on board with it, I just have to help, you need to help me figure out where this fits within these priorities. You need to help me figure out how big is the impact of this thing. Because like, if I show you the roadmap today, and if we're doing these things, which helps us get to here and achieve these goals, like, where does your thing fit into this? So almost try and take them on the journey of showing them, like, where does your thing fit in, and get them to talk themselves out of it by seeing that it doesn't quite stack up with the things that are on the roadmap, or it's not as impactful, and then act genuinely surprised and upset with them. Like, oh shit, I like that feature. Like, I wish we could have done that maybe next year. But then the other side of the fence I've seen is a lot of product managers not say no. And they give the bullshit excuses around it, right? Like, it's on the backlog, we'll get to it here, or like, just say no to these people. Like, otherwise they'll keep coming back round, right? They'll pop up next sprint, next quarter, they'll think that you've accepted their idea and that you're going to do it. So if it's a no, make it a no, and then they can move on and you can move on. Otherwise, every month you'll manage all the people that you said no to last month, and that's a whole new, extravaganza again. Totally
agree with you on that last point. I'm curious because we're going to open it up to questions from the audience, but maybe if it helps, and also I'm curious if there's anyone listening and watching us tonight who has got a tip or suggestion on saying no and making, having those prioritization discussions, which is, I'm sure that's something that we all have to grapple with on a regular basis. You're not in this meetup. Are we allowed to pick on people, or is that not how it works?
I wouldn't pick on anyone. We don't pick on our
But I'm just curious. I'm curious.
I'm happy to encourage people to speak.
Encourage.
If they want to do, and John was keen to share earlier. So if anyone's keen to share, guys, feel free to unmute, or just as we did earlier, message in the chat, and I'll lead you in.
Yeah, if that's okay. I don't want to put anyone on the spot. I'm just curious to hear if anyone is.
I think they're just enjoying hearing from yourself and our expert panel. So our
esteemed panel, yeah, it's definitely a panel. No, anyone good tips? I'm looking at keeping close eye on the chat.
There is some questions no? I'll relay back in a bit if you want. Cool. Some good stuff came up earlier, but
the other thing, a bit similar to Dave, if I can be that person who's is. I also make people aware, be very open about the trade-offs. So very explicit about it. Say, okay, if we go for your idea or this direction, that's cool. But please note, these are the kind of, downsides or trade-offs, or it might be at the detriment. That's something that's already in progress, and especially more mature companies, I sometimes talk about the cost of delay, because people, again, it's a bit like me talking about risk, that resonates. So again, I made the mistake early on in my career, talking about my directness. I'm from the Netherlands, so no is just no, and it's really computer says no. And I've learned very quickly that doesn't get you very far. So I've learned, for instance, to think more about options, talking about being very transparent about trade-offs, still making a recommendation, saying this is what I would do given the circumstances, again, just as a way of taking people on the journey.
So just on that then, Mark, so one thing I've not heard a great deal about tonight, and something I've kind of used myself, and I think it's probably part of the equation of what we're discussing here, is that whole idea of taking that data-driven decision-making approach. So, we're talking about managing stakeholders. We've talked about tensions. We've talked about, being firmer. We've talked about, Dave used the analogy of the boat, and, everybody's got to kind of be singing from the same hymn sheet and, rowing in the same direction, and that's all good. But a couple of times this year, I've definitely found myself in situations where presenting people with data and explaining, some options and decisions by using the data, and making it clear that you would prefer to make decisions by using, what does the data tell us, I think is probably one of our more effective approaches. Well, what's your thoughts on that? We'll do the panel have any views on that?
Any experience of talking about data and informing decisions and telling that story? Kunbi, I think. Yes, please.
Thank you. So I think about a year ago when I started in this role, I had a team, or someone from a team come up to me and say, we need to change, or can we change the sign up page? Because we know we've got lots of requests coming in from the users saying it's not, it's not effective. We've got all these issues. And I thought, okay, so this sounds like a real problem, but I thought, you say you have all these people reporting issues. Can we have some numbers for the past 2 months, for example? And then they said, well, we haven't been tracking, but we can track for the next month. Lo and behold, we track for the next month, and it's less than 0.01% of people who've had this issue. And we're not saying it's not a thing. We're not saying it shouldn't get fixed, but their proposed solution, which they came up to me with, was let's redesign the sign-up page. And what we ended up doing was basically just changing some text to say you need to upload legal ID, and that solved the problem. So I think kind of what Sath was saying, or Dave was saying as well, sometimes, in fact, many times, it helps both yourself and the stakeholder go on that journey together. So when they come to you and say, we need to have this feature, it's the next big thing, people are going to churn if we don't have this. Be open, because I want to know, I want to be honest with myself. This might be a real, like the next big thing. So let's walk with that together. Why do we need to do this? What are the numbers we're looking at? What's the kind of feedback we've received? And then based on that information / data, let's decide, is this the right direction to go? And from my experience, 90% of the time, once they've gone through that journey, they're the ones who come back and say, well, actually, it's probably not the best idea. Let's do something else. So I agree that there's a place for that, the journey and the data, for sure.
And anyone else on the panel who's got some good examples of saying no, particularly with data? This is also to answer a question from Anna, who's asking for some stories, which I think we've shared, but particularly when it comes to data, and a bit like Kunbi was saying, almost objectifying the situation. Dave, Sean, Ruby. Dave?
I've used the BuzzFeed tactic of, you'll be shocked to discover that X number of people do this thing. But mostly as in, you'll be shocked to discover that no one does the thing that you thought they did with the product. And that's why we will not be building this thing that you asked us to build. So mostly from the shocked angle, like, oh yeah, I too thought that people would do that, but it turns out nobody does.
Cool, thank you. And I'm just looking at the questions, because we got a good question from Jim, who says, what heuristics, if any, do you employ to help dilute the tension? So if there's tension, and we talked about different types of tension and examples tonight, any tactics that work for you in terms of diluting the tension?
I think for me, just going back to the company's goals and mission, right? So if there's tension, take it a step back to say, okay, what are we trying to achieve? What's this company's mission? Or, what are our goals for this quarter? So just take it back one step away from the feature that you're arguing about to the, why are we all here? Why do we show up for work today?
Yeah, on a more tactical and interpersonal level, things like doing a pre-mortem, and that's, if possible, before you start working on a product, or you start working on a sprint, or you start working on a project, where in a safe space you feel that there's a bit of tension there. You bring some people who are in the boat, to use Dave's analogy, so building the product together or have skin in the game, and you talk about all the things that could potentially go wrong. So instead of doing a post-mortem, you're doing it pre. And it's a really good way, simple way, but I find it working really well to talk openly about risks, but in a constructive way, in such a way that you can also say, okay, what do we need to do to mitigate those risks? And give people assurances that you will tackle the biggest risk that you identify. Are there any other kind of examples that you found working for you? Anyone on the panel in terms of diluting tension or taking out or managing it a bit better? Sean, Ruby, Kunbi? Ruby.
I was just going to say, like, sometimes you can feel the tension, whether it, I guess, like in person, but we haven't done that in a while, but you can generally feel either virtually or within the group dynamics. And I feel sometimes if it has, there is something, I always like pick it up afterwards. Like sometimes people don't want to discuss it on the call or in person. It's like, hey, let's just grab a coffee, let's understand, or let's just sit and talk about that. It seemed like I just wanted to get your point and just help clarify, because sometimes it can be a misunderstanding, or people just need more information. So I do think sometimes it's just listen, respect them, like don't sort of bring it up in a situation that people might feel uncomfortable for. If there is tension that you can feel, and I think it's like grab them after, or sorry, not grab them after, but you know what I mean. Grab them will cause a lot of tension, so we don't want to do that. But yeah, I think just like a nice one-on-one chat sometimes.
And do you have any, or you, Ruby, or anyone on the panel, just because it might still be difficult with some people to even having that conversation afterwards? Where do you start to say, have you got any tips on how you start that conversation afterwards? I agree, it's easier to have a one-to-one. Any thoughts, especially if you're dreading that conversation?
Yeah, I think sometimes like it's just like I think before what I've done, just be like, hey, I think you start with the niceties potentially and just be like, oh, hey, do you have 5 minutes? Really keen to get your thoughts on this. Or I'm the point that you've mentioned in the meeting, like, can you help clarify? I'm just trying to understand a little bit better. So I think it's about potentially putting it back on that other person, but also showing that you understand and you're respecting them, so that they feel comfortable and it is a safe space before you be like, sorry, I don't understand what you're saying, or I don't agree, or just being more positive, or can you explain, or just more open questions, I guess, so that you can find that alignment.
Thank you. Kunbi, do you have any thoughts or experiences in terms of, diluting some of that tension?
Yeah, I would say, I think, back to what Ruby was saying, what I have found, and I kind of also learned this a hard way, is being proactive with these conversations definitely helps. As a product manager, one of the most important things is building trust. And this doesn't happen immediately. It might take 5 or 6 events for the stakeholder to know, okay, she's on my side. If she says no about something, or if I sense we're on 2 different sides, I'm going to give her the benefit of a doubt, but that takes a while to build. So as an example, I think it was about 1.5 years ago, I had someone from the engineering team. We were working on this project and we had a specific deadline, and he was super passionate. So he's a dev who's very product minded, and he felt we should launch this thing in 2 months. Never mind that it's an MVP. If we have got just one feature, I think that's good to launch. And I said, well, this is not just a new product, it's a new market. We want to make sure that this is in a very, very good shape. So I'm happy to wait 2 more months to get not a perfect product, but something that's as close as possible to solving the customer's problem. But he wasn't happy because he was keen to push this like the next day. And we had conversations, we had team meetings, and I realized he got quiet. And so I reached out to him and said, hey, I noticed that, you seem quite keen to get this thing pushed in the next few weeks. Can I just ask why? Like, why do you feel so passionate about doing this right away? And he thanked me for being, for listening and for even noticing that he was obviously very enthusiastic. And he just explained why he felt we should do it then. And I kind of gave him, I explained my perspective from both a product and a business point of view, and he understood. And even though he still thought we should do it sooner, I think from the point of view of trust and respect, he was happy that I reached out to him and said I had noticed that he was uncomfortable and that I was open to have a conversation, about possibly moving the release date forward. So I think just being proactive about these sorts of conversations helps to build trust. And once you've established trust down the line, it's like an investment. Those conversations get a lot easier.
Cool. Thank you. Yeah, that sounds good. And I saw a question from Shane, which, because Shane asks about, and I think Dave touched on it in the beginning as well, and I talked about, leaning into tension or even creating a bit of tension when there's no tension. How do you do that? So you come into a setting where everyone's happy, we're doing well, we're almost a bit of complacency in a way, but we're all friends coming to each other's birthday parties. Fantastic. It's almost like, where's the tension gone? And you feel, rightly or wrongly, that we need a bit of tension because you see disruptors coming in the market. How do you do that? Sean, any examples? Particularly, I'm thinking, again, mortgage market needs a bit of tension, right?
Yeah, I think sometimes if there's not tension there, as you mentioned, there can be complacency. And you always want to point everyone to the vision so they're thinking of the bigger things down the line which you're looking to do and where you're trying to take the company and the product. So I think sometimes getting back on the same page in terms of the problems we're trying to solve, what we're trying to achieve, can kind of create that drive to think of new ideas or really look at a new market or speak to more customers to develop those ideas that kind of bring the tension or the troubles that kind of occur within the product teams.
Cool. And Dave, because I appreciate you've worked in companies like you mentioned in Marks and Spencer, but might not have been M&S, that are well established, maybe doing well, maybe people have worked there for God knows how long. Maybe there's no tension. You want tension, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, I've been lucky enough to work in companies and in teams that lost. And I say, lucky because like those are the moments in which you learn, right? If the KPIs and things are only ever going up and to the right, like how do you learn? And so I've been lucky enough to fail on numerous occasions and have been in companies that have failed. And what that lets me do is actually bring those real life experiences of fear and losing and knowing what it's like to have your ass kicked by a competitor, and bring that into the conversations. So you can bring it to life with your own real world examples. And I think, being in a kind of, CPO role or any kind of leadership role, it is your job to create a little bit of that tension so that complacency doesn't come in. So you're always, you massively celebrate the wins that your team have, and you are their biggest cheerleader and evangelist when the wins come. And then the very next day, it is your job to be the pessimist and to be the fearmonger of, okay, how do we build on top of this thing that we've just built? Or it'll only be 3 weeks until our competitors catch us up. So what's our next competitive advantage? So kind of like the headroom between, building product and leading product teams is being like a healthy pessimist of the market at all times.
Ruby.
Yeah, I was just trying to think actually of another tension, because I do try and add a little tension here and there, whether it's in prioritization, or I think sometimes when my engineers are like, yeah, Ruby, is going to take a month, and I'm like, and I guess it's like good banter as well. I think you've got to have that really good relationship, whereas they, like Kunbi was saying, it's like trust and all the other different elements. But healthy tension is good tension sometimes, right? You're passionate, everyone wants to strive for the right goal, and aligning across all of that for sure. But I do like to put a bit of spanner in the works of whether it's deadlines, whether it's prioritization or anything like that, just to understand actually, because sometimes people end up following a list and it's like, oh no, Ruby, we should do this because of X. I'm like, I just want to challenge it. Why? Like, has anyone else looked at what else this can bring versus like, okay, this can bring X, Y, Z, and just have a healthy conversation there as well. I feel like I have that quite a lot with prioritization and timelines.
Cool. Thank you. I'm conscious of time, and I know that Seth and the others want to wrap up, but I've got time. You're good. I've got time.
You got 5-10 minutes. Yeah.
Okay, because I want, but still, I would love you to think about and share with us. Can be 1 sentence, 2 sentences. We talked a lot about tensions, things we've learned that we feel are inherent in managing products or working in organizations or dealing with people or building things or failing. We talked about, think about the thing you would have, with what you know now about tensions, about your lessons learned, what would you have said to your younger self when it comes to managing tension as a product person? Dave, I can see you smiling. So can I start with you?
Yeah. I guess just don't be scared, right? It's genuinely terrifying to know that you have to go into a meeting where there's going to be tension or conflict. Someone's going to have divergent opinions. It's quite scary. No one wants to go to work in the day and have those types of conversations. So I think just get comfortable early on in your product career that those will be the 80% of your conversations. And genuinely, if that makes you uncomfortable, maybe it's the wrong career choice overall, I would say, and seek a quieter life.
Thank you, Dave. Sean.
Yeah, similar to what Dave said about seek a quieter life elsewhere. I would think that if I speak to younger myself, I'd say don't be too hard on yourself, because often with the tensions that come, it can cause you to doubt your own abilities, or if you are making the right decisions. Be confident in the data you're using and the inputs that have informed the decision you make. And then once obviously you've made the decision and seen the outputs and the outcomes, then you can measure, okay, did I make the right decision, instead of being swayed by the influences that may come.
Thank you. Kunbi, what would you have said to your younger self, knowing what you know now?
I would have said, detach yourself emotionally and be objective. I think one of the top mistakes I made back in the day was getting really emotional about things. So if people didn't agree with me, or if I had to go into this challenging stakeholder meeting, I would think, oh my gosh, what if it doesn't go my way? I'm going to be super upset. Now I realize it's not about you. It's not personal. Be open. If you go into a meeting with a set, way of thinking, and someone else convinces you to think in a different way. That's not a bad thing. So be open, but be very objective as well. Detach yourself emotionally, and just, just let your head make the decisions, not your heart. That's what I would say.
Nice one. Thank you. And Ruby, last but not least.
Yeah, I think, I guess on this topic of tension is the fact that even after reading your book as well, Mark, just realizing that everyone experiences tension. So it's not just you, or it's never just oh my God, it must be me. But actually so many people are going through the same thing every day. Like we were all saying today about tension, and the last time it was an hour, 2 hours, whatever it may be. It's just the fact that everyone is in the same boat. I'll bring the boat back in, same boat. And the best thing is just to learn from it, pick it up, learn from it next day, and just try and move forward, I would say.
Thank you so much. On that note, before I hand over to Saf, and I want to have I'm going to clap here. Hope you can all join me. Thank you so much, panel, for being so open, sharing your stories, sharing your examples. Really appreciate. And thank you for having us. But yeah, that was a great conversation. Really appreciate it. Thank you, Dave, Sean, Ruby, and Kunbi.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it was great.
Thank you all.
No, we've still got 8 minutes. No, that was excellent. Thank you all. So you have my thanks, Mark, Dave, Ruby, Kunbi, Sean. Really good, insightful chat. Great questions. Great to hear more of your own insights and your own experience, and what you've actually experienced in your roles. I did have a curious question for Dave. I don't know if I'm still. I guess I'm still allowed to ask questions. Anybody else can if they want. So, Dave, you're a chief product owner. Does that say a little bit about the way you're working in your organisation? Because I know a particular framework where that's quite an important role. Or am I reading too much into that?
I think job titles are bullshit. It just means that I'm the first person that gets fired when it all
the
goes
product doesn't succeed.
A bit wrong. Yeah, exactly that. Yeah.
No, you have been very kind of very sort of authentic and honest about your own personal experiences. And I loved how at the start, when Mark was asking you when your last experienced tension is, like 5 minutes ago. It was all very recent. I thought that was very good. No, listen, thank you all. We greatly appreciated it. We love doing the panel sessions. We haven't really done that many of them, but no, I was glad to close out the year with this one. So thanks, Mark, to you for joining us tonight and facilitating an excellent conversation. I really appreciate that. Just to explain to everyone, everybody who's the regulars are certainly aware that we usually have the hard stop, but we're going to keep the Zoom session open this evening for at least half an hour or so. So, if you want to hang about and stay and chat, I'm going to sit here and reflect on the year that we've had, Babs and I, and Donald. I think Donald's had to drop off, unfortunately. He's not feeling too well this evening. Have a few beers, and, for us, it's been a great year. It's been a difficult year all around, everybody. I'm sure nobody would argue with that. It's been a turbulent year. We've all had our challenges. Everybody's challenges have been different. But, we've all kind of stuck together and kind of come through it. And there is some light at the end of the COVID tunnel. So who knows what 2021 will bring. Bringing it back to Future of Work Scotland, we did 31, I think it was 31 sessions this year. We did back-to-back sessions every week from March right through to September. And, it's been a great privilege to bring these sessions to our community and watch the community grow, and then be able to have speakers join us from all corners of the globe and be very generous with their time. And we've all learned so much too. So, I think it's been a great experience. And I'm sure Babs would agree with me. I can't see her right now. I've not got it in gallery view, but it's been brilliant. In terms of community shout outs, I think Lean Agile Edinburgh have got an event next week on the Tuesday. So I think they're doing a session on icebreakers and energizers. I think it'll have a festive flavour. So if you're interested in that, do sign up for that. And of course, there's Agile Scotland on the 10th and the 11th So I'll be there for the second day. So yeah, hope to see some of you there. And I don't have any announcements for other events coming up for us, because Donald and I are busy beavering away in the background on our plans and backlog for 2021. We do have a couple of ones nearly ready to publish for early in the year in January, so look out for those. And yeah, just thanks again for joining us. Thank you all for your contributions this evening. I'm sure Mark and the panel appreciated your input and you sharing your comments. And yeah, thanks for being on this journey with us. And I hope you'll hang about, for a little bit and hang out and chat and share your stories. Maybe talk a little bit about some of the sessions that you enjoyed over the year, or what you might like to see in the coming year, or just have a laugh, talk about whatever you want. We're around to chew the fat, as it were, as we say in Scotland. So thank you all, and yeah, hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Thanks again.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having us, and thanks for all your questions and input. Appreciate it.